$1's worth of gasoline and a 5-minute walk up a hillside can tell you more about where gold is actually sitting than an entire weekend of swirling gravel in a pan. Most people never make that walk. They crouch at the water's edge, scanning for something yellow and shiny, and they call that prospecting. It isn't. Gold is too rare and too fine to reliably spot by eye in most creeks, and by the time you're staring at gravel, you've already skipped the 5 rocks that would have told you whether that gravel was worth testing in the first place. Today we're going over those 5 rocks, what they actually look like in the field, and how the people who find gold consistently use them before they ever touch a pan. Here's the frustrating part. Beginners spend hours panning random bends of a creek because that's what they've seen in videos, and most of that time is wasted on ground that was never going to produce anything. It's not that panning is the wrong skill. It's that panning without reading the surrounding geology first is like knocking on every door in a city block, hoping one of them happens to be a bank vault. The tools people are sold, pans, sluice boxes, metal detectors, are all downstream tools. They only work once you're already standing over the right dirt. Nobody hands you the part that tells you where the right dirt actually is. That part exists, and it isn't complicated once you know it. Gold almost never shows up alone. It travels with a small, repeatable cast of companion rocks and minerals that form or concentrate alongside it, either because they crystallized in the same underground fluids millions of years ago, or because they share the same physical properties that make gold settle out of moving water. Learn to recognize that cast of 5 and you stop guessing. Some of them point uphill toward gold still locked inside solid bedrock. Others point downstream toward gold that has already broken loose and is quietly collecting in gravel traps. Knowing which one you're looking at changes where you put your pan entirely. Prospectors have been reading these signs for a very long time, long before anyone called it a science. During the California and Australian gold rushes of the mid-1800s, miners with no formal geology training still learned, mostly by trial and error, that certain rock types kept showing up wherever the gold was good, and that certain other rock types meant they were wasting their time. That folk knowledge eventually got formalized as economic geology matured in the late 19th and 20th centuries, and now the same indicators taught in university mineral exploration courses are exactly what a weekend prospector can learn to spot, with nothing more than a hand lens and a magnet. Rock 1 is quartz, and it's still the single most important rock in this whole system. Gold frequently crystallizes inside fractures in white or milky quartz veins, sometimes visible to the eye, more often locked in as material too fine to see without magnification. In the field, vein quartz breaks with a glassy, curved conchoidal fracture and shows up as angular, freshly broken-looking chunks, very different from the smooth, rounded quartz pebbles that have simply tumbled downstream for years. Spot blocky white quartz sitting on a hillside above a creek, and you're often looking at material eroding straight out of a hard rock system uphill, which is exactly why prospectors test the water directly below it. Rust-colored staining on that quartz is an even stronger signal, since it usually means sulfide minerals inside the vein have oxidized at the surface, and those sulfides frequently share space with gold in the same mineral system. A simple scratch test helps confirm you're looking at quartz at all. A steel knife blade will skid across it rather than bite in. Rock 2 is pyrite, nicknamed fool's gold for good reason. Its brassy color and metallic shine fool people constantly, but experienced prospectors don't dismiss it because pyrite and gold frequently crystallize together in the same hydrothermal veins. Finding pyrite doesn't mean you found gold. It means the chemistry of that vein system was active enough to concentrate metal-bearing minerals in the first place, which is a genuine step toward gold-bearing ground rather than a false alarm. The fastest field test is behavior under pressure. Pyrite is brittle and will shatter or crumble at an edge, while real gold simply bends and dents. A cheap streak plate settles any argument instantly too. Pyrite leaves a greenish-black streak, gold leaves a yellow one. Rock 3 is gossan, which is what pyrite and other sulfides become after they weather, and it's often the single most visible clue on an entire hillside. Gossan is the rust-colored, iron-stained rock left behind once near-surface sulfide minerals oxidize and break down, showing up as an orange-brown ridge standing out against gray or greenish surrounding rock. Not every rust stain qualifies. Desert iron crusts and weathered basalt can look similarly orange, with no connection to gold at all. Genuine gossan usually keeps a quartz or silicified structure underneath, and breaking one open often reveals a honeycombed, hollow boxwork texture where the original sulfide crystals dissolved away and left only iron oxide behind. Spotting real gossan above a creek is one of the strongest reasons to go test the gravel below it. Rock 4 is black sand, and this is the one where gravity finally does the sorting work for you. Black sand isn't a single mineral. It's a heavy concentrate of magnetite, ilmenite, hematite, garnet, and similar dense grains that settle out wherever moving water slows down. Gold belongs in that exact same density layer, So wherever black sand collects, inside river bends, behind boulders, at the base of small waterfalls, is where gold tends to collect too. A strong hand magnet pulls the magnetite straight out of a dry concentrate without removing any gold, since native gold isn't magnetic at all. Even finding black sand without any gold in it still tells you something useful. The river is sorting heavy minerals correctly, which means gold could still show up there if the right source rock exists somewhere upstream. Rock 5 is the host rock itself, greenstone, along with a related metamorphic rock schist, and it answers the most basic question of all. Are you even standing in the right kind of country for gold to exist here in the first place? A significant share of the world's historically mined gold has come out of greenstone belts, dense, greenish-gray metamorphic terrain often cut through by quartz veins. It looks completely unremarkable, which is exactly why beginners walk right past it. But greenstone near major fault zones is where hot, mineral-rich fluids historically moved through the crust and deposited quartz and metal into the surrounding fractures. Find greenstone bedrock, quartz veins, sulfide staining, and black sand all in the same valley, and you're no longer guessing. You're reading a complete geological sentence from start to finish. This isn't proprietary knowledge locked away somewhere. Mining companies pay geologists specifically to read the same sequence of indicators before they ever commit to drilling, because a single exploratory drill hole can cost tens of thousands of dollars and nobody wants to spend that on a hunch. The reason most weekend prospectors never learn it isn't secrecy. It's that panning gear is what sells at the outdoor store, and a 5-minute lesson in field geology doesn't fit neatly into a product box. The information has been sitting in mineral exploration textbooks for 100 years. It just never made it into the beginner's kit. Putting all 5 together in the field is straightforward once you know the order. Walk the high ground before you ever touch the creek, since the real story almost always starts uphill. Ask 4 questions as you go. Is the bedrock greenstone or schist? Are quartz veins present, and do any of them show rust staining? Is there visible pyrite or gossan anywhere nearby? And does the creek below actually hold black sand in its heavy layer? A basic kit, a pan, a classifier screen, a hand lens, a cheap streak plate, and a strong magnet is genuinely enough to test all 5 clues in a single afternoon, well before you commit to panning a single scoop of gravel. A few honest limitations are worth knowing before you head out. None of these 5 rocks guarantees gold. They're filters that narrow down where to look, not promises of what you'll find. Old mine workings, exposed tunnels, and unstable cut banks are far more dangerous than they look from a distance, so stay out of collapsed portals, and don't dig underneath unstable overhangs. And always confirm claim status and land access before you sample anything, since indicator rocks can tell you where gold is likely to be, but they can't tell you whether you're legally allowed to dig there. The real shift here was never about memorizing 5 rock names. It's learning to walk into any creek and read the ground as one continuous story. Source rock, vein, weathering, concentration, instead of scanning gravel and hoping something catches the light. That's the actual difference between prospecting as luck and prospecting as a system. From all of us here at Hidden Fix Lab, get out to your nearest creek, walk the high ground first, and see what the rocks have been trying to tell you the whole time.